the United States and the United States Air Force. The singularly distinctive accomplishments of Colonel Compton reflect great credit upon himself and Civil Air Patrol.
We'll have Jill Rob Wilson's granddaughter present this to him. So it's good to have the cadets stand there. They're more photogenic. Eddie's members. And then at this time, if you would like to speak, sir, no, please.
Thank you, Colonel. Okay.
There's your notes, sir.
This is a real treat. Thank you. You know, it's really all about flying, isn't it? I might go back quite a ways and say it all started, it was 1937 that I got my license. And I did a lot of flying around the East Coast at the time, and when I came back to after school, I had the privilege of flying out of the now defunct Harlem Airport in Chicago, where there was later a CAP squadron. One of the best, my license number was 42197. Which I think is pretty early. But I used to fly some future dates that I was really quite macho at the time, and while some of my contemporaries in school there, I was in the business school, were trying to win dates by driving them in their Mary Oldsmobile. Well, I upped him one. I invited him to go flying with me. And in my logbook, I remember making notations about who were some of my passengers. And I rated them. I finally had to stop putting too much in the logbook. There was so little room to put in information that I would do some abbreviations. And one of the abbreviations on the dates that I had was H and then NSH. And I was trying to remember, rating these passengers, whether or not it was homely and not so homely. But I finally had to confess later that H meant hot. So as a matter of fact, I was able to get some of the beauty queens aboard, especially one particular lady who I later married. I remember on some of those flights, I would try to be very relaxing and say to him, boy, are we having fun or what? But what I really meant was, honey, realize that your life is in my hands. So that was a lot of fun years. But then it all changed. It was a Sunday, December 7th, 1941. I was out doing touch and goes, and I landed. Somebody came out and said, all aircraft are grounded. From then I went back and went to the Army Air Force recruiting office and tried the Navy too, but because I'd lost a kidney some years before, they decided they didn't want me. So I went to work in a war plant. I left a 9-to-5 job, 5 days a week, and worked in a plant that made aircraft gears. 10-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week, and that was work. And I just had to appreciate what was going on all this time in the war effort. I started out just pushing skids of gears around, and finally worked up into work a machine, a grinding machine. And I made so much scrap, they decided to put me in a position of expediting. Well, I was there for a long time, and then I realized that I'd rather be flying. So when the opportunity came, I quit and went to work for the Civil Air Patrol. I was assigned to the Patrol 1 base in Atlantic City, New Jersey. I have a little quote here of some of the activity that'll give you a background of why I thought it was so important to join up and do this work. The Colonel mentioned some of the activity that was going on at the time and the reason for the mission. And this is a couple of paragraphs from Louis Kiefer's book, From Maine to Mexico. It reads much more eloquently than I could express it myself. He writes here that danger lurked along the waterfront. Mysterious blinkers contacted offshore craft at night. Enemy agents rubbed shoulders with sailors in bars and restaurants, alert for news of ship movements. Shortwave sets concealed in attics and basements relayed information from towns and cities along the coast. 8 Nazi saboteurs, school and Coast Guard, intercepted by Coast Guard entries. 4 Nazis landed on a Florida beach, and the other 4 near the eastern tip of Long Island after disembarking from submarines in rubber boats. The 245 transatlantic monsters spawned in the pens of Lorient, Bremen, and Wilhelmshaven became brazenly impudent. They sank a ship in the mouth of the Connecticut River, potted 2 more in St. Lawrence, and crept up into the lower Mississippi to threaten shipping flying out of New Orleans. Before dim outs were ordered along the coast, the U-boats turned toward the waters off brightly lighted resort cities into shooting galleries, ramming torpedoes into sharply silhouetted tankers and merchantmen within sight of the boardwalk crowds. Sometimes, in order to conserve their tin fish, subs blasted shipping with their 2 formidable 4-inch guns. On occasion, U-boat crews hung out their wash and took sunbaths on deck when their crafts surfaced to charge batteries. This was the desperate situation With much skepticism and little real support, the Armed Forces permitted the Coastal Patrol a 90-day trial in which period to prove its worth operating from only 3 bases: Atlantic City, New Jersey, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and Lantana, Florida. To the surprise of none, the volunteers who served the equipment succeeded. And during the next 18 months, more than 3,000 men and women left their homes, their jobs, and their loved ones to staff 21 different coastal patrol bases. During tens of thousands of missions, Coastal Patrol crews flew more than 24 million miles over water, spotted 173 submarines, dropped bombs or depth charges against 57 of them, and were officially credited with sinking or damaging at least 2. These accomplishments were paid for with the loss of 90 planes and the lives of 26 Coastal Patrol members, most of them drowned or frozen to death at sea. This is the story of those unheralded volunteers as told by 275 survivors of the fight: the pilots, observers, mechanics, radio and plotting board operators, linesmen, guardsmen, officers who served. These men and women tell of their satisfaction in serving their country, their excitement over daily base activities, their ingenuity in improving the most often primitive conditions in which they lived and worked, and their dedication in returning to the fight after harrowing crashes and ditchings of small planes in the ocean. They deserve the heartfelt gratitude of the nation. So arriving there in Atlantic City, we would be able to tell what kind of a day we're going to have by the daily briefing. We would show up with our May West record books, logs and all, and we could tell what kind of a day it was going to be by whether or not we saw the Army ordnance trailers out there arming the aircraft. If they weren't there, we knew that there were friendly submersibles in the area, and they certainly didn't trust us because we were all pretty gung-ho looking for a fight, to be out there armed and hit the wrong target, and maybe even a whale. But then we would generally fly 3-hour missions, escorting the tankers and the colliers and cargo ships up and down the coast, hand over from other sections. And we would try to fly low enough to read their signal flags, which was very difficult. And of course, we couldn't see any of the light signals. We did have to learn Morse code, and I think a lot of us only got as far as dit 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 da 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 dit dit dit, save our ship. So our contact with our escorts was minimal, except we did fly low enough to be able to give them a wave. And when we left them off and we dipped our wing and saw them heading east into harm's way, we were able to go back to a safe haven. And we thought a lot about those brave souls, some that didn't make it. We would report back, depending upon headwind conditions and fuel. We would always be tapping that fuel gauge, to make sure that the fuel gauges were accurate. And then call into base. And we generally had a female communicator. And they often said that some of the pilots always if they're in a tense situation,